I vanished with one bag before the sun came up. For years I stayed quiet and small until I stopped asking for permission. What I left on the counter shattered everything he thought he controlled. From the outside, I had everything. Married to Ethan, a successful entrepreneur with a last name people recognized. A house that looked like something out of Architectural Digest. Luxury trips, designer clothes, wine tastings I barely understood. Even my friends said I was living the dream. But no one asked if it was my dream. I met Ethan when I was 25 and still figuring out what I wanted. He was 35, polished, confident, and terrifyingly sure of himself. He told me on our second date that he planned to be married within a year. I laughed. He didn't. Within 6 months, I had a ring on my finger and a new last name. He said I wouldn't have to worry about working anymore, that my job would be building our life together. I remember thinking it sounded romantic. Like being chosen. Now I know better. It wasn't a choice. It was a contract. One I signed without reading the fine print. Because that perfect house came with rules. That ring came with expectations. And Ethan, charming, generous Ethan, came with a coldness I didn't see until I was already locked in. It started small. He didn't like when I wore red lipstick, said it was too much. He asked me to unfollow certain friends, said they brought drama. He rewrote parts of me until I couldn't tell where I ended and his preferences began. At dinner parties, I was expected to nod, smile, laugh on cue. He called me his goddess to other people, but at home, I was just quiet. I stopped painting. Stopped writing. Stopped asking questions. Every time I brought up how I felt, he'd tilt his head and say, "I give you everything. Why are you still unhappy?" I didn't have an answer. So I stopped trying to find one. Until the night I overheard him on the phone. He was in his office, door cracked. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I was bringing him tea. He was talking to someone, a man, from the sound of it. She's good. Pretty. Quiet. The way I like them. Pause. She knows better than to make things difficult. I froze. Tea trembling in my hands. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Like I wasn't a person, just a product he'd acquired. Like being manageable was my main achievement. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I went back to the bedroom, stared at my reflection in the mirror, and tried to remember the last time I recognized my own face. That was the night something shifted. Not a loud break. More like the quiet creak of a door starting to open. And I knew. He gave me everything. Except freedom. The next morning, Ethan kissed me on the forehead and told me he had a full day of meetings. He smiled like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't described me like a house pet the night before. I stood there barefoot on the marble floor, nodding like I always did. He walked out in his tailored suit, briefcase in one hand, car keys in the other. The sound of the garage door closing felt like the click of a cell door locking shut. And then silence. It was the kind of silence most people would envy. No screaming. No chaos. Just calm, curated stillness. But in that stillness, I heard everything. I walked into his office. Not to snoop, just to see. To really see it. Dark wood. Leather chair. Minimalist decor. Cold. Like him. I stared at the desk for a long time. Then I opened the top drawer. Not even locked. Inside, a set of flash drives. Business cards. A worn notebook with columns of names and numbers. Receipts from dinners I'd never been invited to. And tucked between the pages a handwritten note. Not in his handwriting. Last night was worth the risk. Can't stop thinking about you. I didn't feel rage. Not then. Just confirmation. The way you feel when you finally spot the crack in the wall you've been leaning on for years. I closed the drawer. Left everything where it was. That night, I cooked dinner. He complimented the lamb. Told me I was glowing. I almost laughed. Because what he didn't know was that I'd spent the whole afternoon researching apartments. Tiny ones. Studio layouts. Walk-ups in neighborhoods he'd never stepped foot in. I wasn't planning to leave. Not yet. But I was imagining it. And for the first time in years, the imagining felt more real than the life I was actually living. I started hiding cash. Not much, just enough to know it was mine. He always said I didn't need money of my own. That we shared everything. That trust meant transparency. Funny how transparency only ever applied to me. I opened a new email account. On a burner laptop I said was for creative writing. He smiled indulgently when I told him. Said it was cute, that I wanted to start journaling again. I let him believe that. At night, when he fell asleep, peaceful, powerful, predictable, I'd sit on the bathroom floor and write. Not plans. Just truths. Like, I miss the version of me that used to say no without flinching. I don't want to live in a museum anymore. Luxury isn't safety if you have to earn it by disappearing. He doesn't hit me, but he erases me. Some nights I felt brave. Others like a coward in designer pajamas. But each small step felt like building something no one could see yet. Like planting escape routes beneath a garden of roses. One morning he mentioned we had a gala coming up. A fundraiser. He needed me to be on. Wear the gold dress. The one that makes you look softer. Softer. As in quieter. Smaller. Invisible. I said sure. Then Googled divorce attorneys while he showered. I didn't call anyone. Not yet. But I wrote down 2 names. Just in case. A week later we went to the gala. He smiled. Introduced me as his better half. People laughed. Toasted. Complimented us. I nodded. Tilted my head just right for the cameras. But inside? I was miles away. Walking barefoot through a cheap apartment. Eating takeout on the floor. Laughing with the window open. Not needing to ask for permission to exist. That night, I watched him sleep again. His chest rising and falling. His phone buzzing quietly on the nightstand. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. He was a man who loved control. And I had finally found mine, not in confrontation, but in quiet intention. I wasn't ready to leave, but I had already stopped staying. It happened at the bookstore. Not a fancy one, not the kind Ethan would approve of. Just a little independent place tucked between a coffee shop and a yoga studio. I went there by accident. Or maybe instinct. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan was in meetings. I told him I had errands. That I'd pick up wine. Instead, I picked up silence. And paper. An air that didn't feel like it belonged to him. I wandered the aisles with no intention. Let my fingers trail the spines like they used to when I was 20 and everything still felt possible. And then I heard my name. Naomi. I froze. No one had called me that in months. Not really. Not with softness. I turned. He stood in front of me smiling. Familiar but older. Sun-kissed skin, dark eyes, worn denim jacket. It took me a second. Then click. Miles. College boyfriend. First love. The boy who once bought me sunflowers because I said daisies were too predictable. We hadn't spoken in over 10 years. Last I knew he moved to Oregon. Played music. Dated a girl who made jewelry. I felt myself straighten up, like I was on display. But he just laughed gently. Same hair, he said. Same stubborn eyes. I smiled. But it didn't reach. Because I didn't feel like Naomi. Not anymore. He asked if I had time for coffee. And before I could second-guess it, I said yes. We sat at a tiny table near the window. He ordered black coffee. I ordered tea out of habit. We talked like 2 people flipping through different versions of the same memory book. He asked about my life. I kept it vague. Married. Living in the city. Helping with my husband's business. I could hear how flat it sounded. Like reading a bio someone else wrote for me. He tilted his head. You still paint? I blinked. No, I said. Haven't in years. He frowned. Why not? You were incredible. You used to carry that sketchbook everywhere. I shrugged. Life gets busy. But inside something cracked. Because he didn't say it like small talk. He said it like grief. Like he missed a version of me I forgot ever existed. He didn't press. We talked a little more about music, about mutual friends, about how fast everything moves now. Then he looked at me and said quietly, I hope whoever you're with sees all of you. Not just the parts that make him look good. I didn't respond. Just nodded. Because what do you say to someone who accidentally reminded you of everything you gave up? We hugged goodbye. It felt like a sigh I'd been holding for years. He didn't ask for my number. Didn't suggest meeting again. Just smiled and said, take care, Naomi. I walked home slowly. Every step felt like dragging a shadow behind me. That night, Ethan asked why I was so quiet. I said I was tired. He didn't push. The next morning, I took out a box from the back of the guest room closet. Inside my old sketchbooks. Still smelling like graphite and dust. I flipped through them like they belonged to someone else. On one page, a messy watercolor self-portrait. Hair wild. Eyes full. A quote in the corner scrawled in black ink. If you let the world shape you, it will choose the easiest mold. I sat on the floor and cried. Not the loud, cinematic kind. Just silent tears dripping onto yellowing pages. Because somewhere in those lines and colors I saw a girl who once believed her voice mattered. And I whispered to her, "I'm coming back. I promise." The next day I bought paint. Not to show Ethan. Not to prove anything. Just to remember what it feels like to choose something without asking. It started with dinner. He came home earlier than usual, tie loosened, phone in hand, smiling that polished smile he always wore when he was about to announce something I'd already been volunteered for. He walked into the kitchen, saw me sitting at the table with tea and a notebook and said, "I made a reservation for 8. New place uptown. You'll like it. Wear that navy dress, the one that makes you look softer." I looked up, calm, steady, and said, "No." Just one word. No raised voice. No apology. But the weight of it dropped like a stone between us. He blinked. "No." He laughed, like I must be joking. "No," I repeated. "I'm not going." He tilted his head, his smile fading. "Why?" "Because I don't want to." There was a pause, not in the room but in him. Like his brain had to reboot because I'd broken the script. "I'm trying to do something nice," he said, voice tightening. "And I'm not interested," I replied simply. He walked closer, leaned his hands on the table. "You know how this looks, right? My colleagues will be there. It'll look weird if you're not." I shrugged. "Then tell them I didn't want to come. Or that I'm tired. Or that I'm busy. Pick any version, but I'm not going." His jaw clenched. I could see it, the moment he realized something was changing. Not loud, not violent, but irreversible. "What's going on with you lately?" he asked. And I said, I remembered who I used to be. And I liked her. He didn't respond. Just turned and left the room, his phone already back in his hand, pacing like a man trying to regain control of a slipping narrative. I sat there a moment longer. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking just slightly. But underneath the nerves was something else. Space. The kind of space I hadn't felt in years. That night I didn't go to the dinner. Didn't wear the navy dress. Didn't explain myself again. Instead, I pulled out my paints. Turned on quiet music. And painted a woman. Not me, not yet. But a woman with wild hair and fire in her eyes. A woman who didn't shrink to fit the room. I hung the painting above the desk. Just for me. Just because I could. And for the first time in years. I went to bed with a quiet kind of victory. Not loud. Not dramatic. But mine. The gifts started arriving 2 days after I said no. A bouquet of white orchids. A small gold necklace, the kind I used to love before I stopped wearing anything that made me feel owned. A handwritten note tucked inside a gift box of lavender-scented candles. "Thought of you. Miss your light." My light. As if he hadn't spent years dimming it. At first I said nothing. I placed the gifts on the hall table and walked past them like they weren't even there. But Ethan noticed. "Did you like the necklace?" he asked over dinner. I shrugged. "It's not my style anymore." He smiled, tight and brittle. "You used to like delicate things." "I used to be a lot of things." He didn't respond. But that night he brought home wine. My favorite vintage. He cooked, or tried to, burning the chicken just enough to make the smoke alarm chirp once before he laughed and ordered takeout instead. "Let's start fresh," he said. "New energy. New rhythm. You and me." I watched him pour wine into the glasses we got as a wedding gift. He handed one to me like a peace offering. I took it. Not because I forgave him. Because I wanted to see how far he'd go before the mask slipped again. We ate. He talked. About work, politics, the stock market. Never once asked about my day. When he stepped away to take a call, I sat there in the quiet and stared at the candle flickering on the table. It smelled like lavender. But to me it reeked of desperation. Later that night, he reached for me in bed. Soft hands. Slow voice. "I miss us," he whispered. I turned my head. "You miss control," I said. He pulled back slightly, then forced a laugh. "You always go so dark." "No," I said. "I've just stopped pretending it's light." He rolled over without another word. Didn't touch me again that night. The next morning, I transferred money from our joint account to the private one I'd opened. Just a small amount. Enough to secure a deposit. I'd found a studio apartment downtown. Tiny. Old floorboards. But sunlight poured through the windows like it belonged there. I hadn't signed the lease yet. But the application was filled out. The box was checked. Move-in date, soon as possible. I began packing in secret. Little things. Books I knew he wouldn't notice were missing. Old photos of my parents. A cracked ceramic mug from college. My journals. He started calling me beautiful more often, complimenting my hair, bringing home pastries I hadn't asked for. All sugar, no substance. I smiled politely, nodded, played the game he was trying to reset. But behind my eyes something cold had settled in. Not hate, not even resentment, just distance. Like I'd already left the room, even while sitting in it. And he could sense it. He just didn't know what to do with it. He wanted to host. Said it would be intimate, just 6 people, 2 couples from his firm, one of his mentors, and his wife. I knew the drill: perfect table, perfect lighting, perfect wife. He asked me to wear the emerald dress. The one with the low back. I did. Not for him. For me. Because when I left, I wanted to remember that I looked like a woman who chose herself, not one who ran away. Dinner began politely. Wine flowed. Conversations stayed safe. Ethan told stories, the kind he'd told 100 times, where he was always the hero, the fixer, the genius who somehow also remained humble. And I played my part. Until I didn't. It happened when his mentor's wife asked me a question. "So, Naomi, what do you do?" Before I could speak, Ethan laughed and answered for me. "She dabbles in creative stuff, painting, journaling, that sort of thing. She keeps herself entertained." The table chuckled politely. I didn't. I looked at him, right in the eye, and said calmly, "Actually, I'm planning an exhibition. Downtown. I just signed the lease on a studio space." His fork paused midair. The table fell silent. He tried to smile. "Oh, that's news to me. I hadn't decided if you needed to know yet." A flash of something behind his eyes, panic maybe, or ego bruising. He cleared his throat. "Well, I hope you're not spending too much time on that. I mean, we both know it's not exactly sustainable." The words hit harder than a slap. Not because they were new, but because this time he said them out loud in front of people. I looked around the table. One man stared down at his plate. Another couple shifted uncomfortably. I smiled, lifted my wine glass. "To sustainability," I said. "And to men who fear what they can't control." I drank, slowly, and in that moment I decided. No more planning. No more waiting. No more hiding bags in closets or transferring money in silence. I was done. After dessert, I cleared the dishes while Ethan stayed in the dining room. I washed every plate carefully, not because I had to, but because I wanted to leave nothing of mine behind that wasn't intentional. Later, he came into the kitchen. Arms crossed. Mouth tense. "What the hell was that?" "It was honesty," I said. "Something new, I know." He shook his head. "You embarrassed me." "No," I said, drying my hands. "You embarrassed yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the truth." He stepped closer. "You're pushing this too far. And you're used to women who stay small." He didn't say another word. Just walked out. And I walked to the bedroom, unzipped the emerald dress, hung it up, then took out my overnight bag from under the bed and placed it by the door. Tomorrow, I would move. And this time, I wouldn't be looking back. I left before sunrise. The city was still asleep, blanketed in that soft gray quiet that makes everything feel gentle, even endings. Ethan was snoring lightly when I zipped my bag. I moved like a shadow through the house, collecting the last fragments of myself from drawers and closets. Not much was mine, really. A worn journal, my brushes and paints, 3 sweaters he never noticed I stopped wearing. In the bathroom, I paused. Looked in the mirror. No makeup. Hair messy. Eyes clear. I looked like me. The woman who laughed with her whole face. The one who used to paint past midnight and drink cold coffee in the morning. The one who forgot how much she liked silence, real silence, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer where we kept the spare keys, and pulled out mine. I laid it gently on the counter. Next to it, I placed an envelope. No name. No explanation. Inside was a Polaroid, taken just 2 days ago. Me standing in my new studio. Hair tied up. Bare feet on wooden floors. A streak of blue paint on my cheek. Smiling. Really smiling. On the back, I'd written, "You had everything. But I gave you someone. And you never saw her. I won't let that happen again." I left it there. Not as a threat. Not as revenge. Just a record. A final page in a story I no longer needed to carry. I slipped out the door. Took one last look at the house. Perfect lines. Clean windows. Still and silent like a museum of a marriage that never breathed. The car I'd called was waiting at the curb. I got in. Closed the door. Didn't flinch when the lock clicked. By the time Ethan woke up, I was already gone. No confrontation. No dramatic scene. Just absence. The text came hours later. Where are you? This isn't funny. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Come home. Let's talk. You'll regret this. I didn't answer. Didn't even read the last few. Because I wasn't trying to hurt him. I just didn't belong to him anymore. Later that week, Devin helped me move into the studio. We carried boxes up the narrow staircase and drank cheap wine on the floor. She asked how I felt. I told her. Empty. And alive. And that was true. I was no longer someone's reflection. No longer someone's accessory. I was mine again. And I knew it wouldn't be easy. I'd have to rebuild. Refine myself in pieces. But for the first time in a long, long time, I wanted to. Because I finally remembered what it felt like. To wake up and not wonder who I had to be that day. Now I get to ask something better. Who do I want to be? And every morning that answer is mine.